Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Jonathan Stone. He is Executive Director of Save the Bay. He's a returning guest to the show, so I'll start by saying welcome back.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate being here.
For those that didn't watch the first show and aren't familiar with the organization, what is Save the Bay?
Save the Bay is an environmental advocacy and education organization. We were founded in 1970 in Providence, Rhode Island. And we're one of the older coastal environmental groups in the country. We're also one of the larger ones in the country, and we have a broad membership of folks from around Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut who support our work.
Why was it decided back during its founding that something like this was necessary?
So Narragansett Bay is a deep water estuary. There's great port facilities in the bay, and back in 1970 there was a proposal to build an oil refinery in Tiverton, Rhode Island, and a group of local citizens got together to fight the development of that oil refinery. And over the years, Save the Bay has been involved in all kinds of different use issues on the bay, and also really focused on restoring the water quality on the bay, and it grew out of that initial community initiative.
Are you able to utilize unfortunate events elsewhere, like for example the BP disaster in the Gulf, to sort of bolster your desire to not have like an oil refinery in your neck of the woods?
Well, I would say that we really focus on local issues, and unfortunately, sadly, to your question, we have had a number of very serious environmental catastrophes in Narragansett Bay or nearby
that aren't covered as nationally.
That are not covered nationally. Several have been. You may recall back in 1996 we had a huge oil spill off the south coast of Rhode Island. We call it the North Cape spill. It was a barge that ran aground in a winter nor'easter and spilled hundreds of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel onto the south coast of Rhode Island. We've had oil spills in Narragansett Bay, and those events do galvanize people, as you'd expect. But we also have lots of other ecological challenges that are manifest in fish kills, for example, that could occur from time to time in the bay. And whenever you have something that visible, people can immediately identify with the threat that exists.
Just as we taped the show the other day, down in or is it Stonington? Westerly, actually, in Musquamacut, didn't some sort of shark kind of come up on shore, and the local news coverage was there, and you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not familiar with that one, but we did have in Providence recently, actually 2 days ago this weekend, a dolphin apparently swam in the upper reaches of the bay and died. We're not sure why. In fact, we called Mystic Aquarium, which has got a great animal rescue program, and they have been very helpful in helping us rescue stranded marine mammals.
When those kinds of things happen, is that something that you are involved with too, or are you a part of like maybe some sort of investigation just to see what happened?
Well, typically we are often the first call that a resident might make if they find an animal, distressed animal, whether it's a whale or a porpoise or a strange sighting of some kind on Narragansett Bay or on the south coast of the state. We're often the first call, and typically we work in partnership with other institutions depending on what the situation is. If it's a marine mammal that's distressed, we would typically call Mystic. If it's an ecological phenomenon, say a fish kill, will usually involve research teams at the University of Rhode Island or Brown University or Roger Williams University.
What is the state of the bay these days?
Sure. Well, one of the great success stories that we have been a big part of is cleaning up pollution in Narragansett Bay. And the most sort of obvious manifestation of that is reductions in the number of bacteria events that close beaches to swimming, to human activities. So we've seen a really pronounced decline in the number of beach closures, whether it's in Newport at First Beach or it's in the Upper Bay. And that's been really related to water pollution controls at wastewater treatment plants in Narragansett Bay and in the tributaries that flow into the bay. We still have a significant threat from, it sort of sounds perverse, but we have too many nutrients flowing into the bay. Estuaries, Narragansett Bay is an estuary, have lots of nutrients that naturally occur, but due to human development of the landscape around the bay and the urbanization of parts of the bay, we have too many nutrients flowing into the bay, and that really degrades water quality to the point where it affects natural life. It doesn't necessarily affect how humans use the water. It's not a bacterial problem, but it really degrades the water quality.
Is it always a sort of a balance between, you know, what humans want to do as far as developing in and around the bay, as opposed to what is best for the bay itself, which may not go in line with what we want as people?
Sure. You know, I would say, there's a common fallacy that I think probably began 30, 40 years ago, that you can either have a clean environment or a healthy economy. And it couldn't be more. The truth is the opposite of that. It is absolutely not the case. In fact, both come hand in hand. You can have a healthy economy, a great place to live, and have a clean bay, and you can improve the quality of the bay over time. But what we've learned over the years is that there are many things we can do in how we develop the landscape, how we use the landscape and use the coastal zone, that can minimize the impacts of our activity. Just simply, one of our big problems in Narragansett Bay is polluted runoff from the landscape. We have a lot of parking lots, strip malls, commercial developments. If you capture that runoff off of those parking lots and allow the water to re-infiltrate into the soil as opposed to running into the bay, you can prevent a pollution problem. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it can enhance the actual environment of the development you're talking about. It's more green space, more trees, and so forth. So it's not an either or. You can have both, but it takes some thoughtful public policy and thoughtful development.
Is that the key? Because you said it's not very expensive to do that, but do you have to lobby? Do you really just have to sort of make it become top of people's minds, including legislators?
Yeah, I mean, you put your finger on it. It's a lot of awareness really helps. If people know that there's something they can do to affect a problem, people really believe in our mission and believe in protecting the bay and care about it. And if they're just educated and informed about what they can do, very often people will take action. Legislators and policymakers also need to be educated about what their role is. And that's something we also work very hard on. It's hard work. It takes a lot of political pressure. Our legislators are under a lot of political pressure and are not necessarily getting the best information. So we work well with them to try and solve some of those problems.
It must be tough for politicians because they have to balance, you know, the desire, the wants of, you know, maybe big-time developers who are willing to spend a lot of money and who want to develop versus what may be, and like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other, but there may be situations where, you know, someone may want to build or just develop in some way that may not necessarily be in the best interest of the bay.
Right. Well, if there's a clear-cut case where a development has been proposed that either damages the bay, requires filling in of the bay, degrades water quality, or even interrupts with public use of the bay, we're likely to be opposed to it. But we're very thoughtful. We take each case on its own merits, and we work with the developers in ways to try and understand if there are ways we can mitigate, you know, minimize the impacts on the bay. That isn't always the case, and if that is the result of our analysis, we will fight the proposal. But that's not our first instinct. Our first instinct is how can we work thoughtfully with a company or organization that wants to use the bay in some fashion and see if there's a way we can minimize those impacts.
It's been a tough year weather-wise. You know, I spent a lot of time down in southern Rhode Island, Musquamaca Beach, and I saw the damage that Superstorm Sandy did there. You know, there were blizzards, or at least a blizzard. How was the bay affected by the weather this past year?
Well, we had, you know, you put your finger on it. The southern part of Rhode Island, southern part of the bay was really hit hard. Musquamaca is a great example. And even in Newport, we have an aquarium exploration center in Newport, and it was destroyed by Hurricane Sandy, and we're now in the rebuilding process there. But one of our, you know, we have been looking very hard at the issue of adaptation to what you're referring to happening with more and more frequency, more storm events, more erosion, and there needs to be a fresh look at how we plan our developments along the coast to adapt to some of these storm events.
So you don't have a situation like Musquamaga Beach. A lot of those were older buildings where they were kind of grandfathered, but once you had to rebuild, they had to come up to code. And they also had, I mean, there was so much damage that they had to rebuild dunes and things of that sort, just so that some kind of natural revitalization would occur there on those beaches.
It turns out there's a, we have a tendency to want to protect our property or private property from the elements, and it's been demonstrated over many decades that no matter how hard you try, Mother Nature wins.
Yeah.
You stand no chance. So retreat is really the way to go if you take the long view, and we're hoping through our efforts and others that property owners and the state and local towns take the long view about how they plan for the effects of climate change.
So that is the effects of Mother Nature. Now I want to talk to you about the effects of the E word, which is economy. Now I thought that since the last time that you were on this show, maybe you coming on now, we could talk about how it was improving. But during our pre-interview, we mentioned the S word, and that was the sequester word.
Right.
So,
right.
And unfortunately, that affects even you and your organization.
Well, it does in a couple of ways. We have we receive federal support for two major initiatives of ours, or one principal initiative, which is habitat restoration work. And federal budget constraints have really resulted in cutting of financial dollars, federal dollars, to support restoration work. Where I'm talking about salt marsh restoration, scallop restoration in the salt ponds, for example. Another sort of perverse effect of the sequester is that we have an annual swim that occurs every year in July. We have about 500 swimmers, I'm one of them actually, who swim from Newport to Jamestown. And it publicizes our mission, it creates a lot of awareness about improvements in water quality, and it's a very important fundraiser for us. And we received notice about a month ago from the Navy that the Naval War College, that they're not being permitted by the Navy Department in Washington to proceed with hosting the start of the swim, which is a big, big challenge for us. It's not easy to find a location to put 500 swimmers, 250 kayakers, and 500 volunteers to pull off an event like this. And we're not alone. There are a lot of other nonprofits that are dealing with this issue, and it's a real challenge for us financially as much as from a communications point of view.
Are you scrambling now to kind of reorganize this in some other capacity? Or?
Well, we're committed to having a swim, so now our challenge is where can we go that is safe, that is challenging for the swimmers, that meets our needs in terms of the start and the finish. And we're working on it. We don't have an answer yet, and we're looking at a couple of different options.
Since you mentioned fundraising, and I brought up the economy, are you still I mean, do you write grants and things of that sort too?
Well, we do have foundations that provide grant support. We get we get no state money from the state of Rhode Island.
How can that be? It's Save the Bay.
Well, in fact, it's funny you mentioned that, because occasionally I'll be asked, is Save the Bay a state agency? And the answer is no. We get no state money at all. And we do value our independence. It's very important that we preserve our integrity and our independence as an advocacy organization. We do get funding from private foundations, but between private foundations and donors, individual donors, that represents the bulk of our financial support. And
plus a lot of great volunteers too.
We have, that's right, we have thousands. I'm glad you brought that up. We have thousands of volunteers. We do a lot of great volunteer programming between beach cleanups and habitat restoration. We also generate funding from public programs we operate. We have a great summer camp program. We have summer camps in Westerly and Newport and Jamestown and Providence, and the summer camps are really terrific events, and we get a lot of support from families that participate in those.
Do you find that even in the tough economic times, were people? I know that you don't get any. It's private funds and some. Are people still willing to dig into their pockets and give? I mean, you obviously noticed it. Maybe your belt was tightened a little bit, but people are still willing to give?
They are. I mean, one of the neat things about our organization is that our supporters are very, very loyal.
And passionate.
And passionate, and they really care a lot. And they also know, they're very sophisticated, they know that the state of Rhode Island, the state environmental protection agencies in Rhode Island, are being cut, their budgets are being cut, the resources are more constrained, and that we fill an important niche, an important role in keeping the state agencies honest, supporting their work, supporting their budgets, but also ensuring that they fulfill their mission to protect the environment. So, you know, we've been very, very fortunate to have donors who have really stood by us during some pretty difficult times.
How about corporate donations?
You know, Rhode Island is as you know, the economy of Rhode Island is a challenging place, and we do not have many large corporations in Rhode Island. Just a handful that that the average viewer might be aware of. CVS, for example, is a great partner of ours. But there are just not that many big corporations that have the resources to support the work that we do. So the answer is we get very little corporate support. I wish we had more. We have great opportunities for corporate partnership. A great example would be Cox Charities. Cox Communications is a great partner of ours, very loyal, very supportive, but they're few and far between.
There's some work that you do where you, even though it's Save the Bay, Narragansett Bay, you actually creep into Connecticut a little bit with some of your work. Talk about that a little bit.
So about 7 years ago, we opened an office in Westerly, and we really approached our mission in Westerly with a focus on Little Narragansett Bay. And as you may recall from your geographic knowledge, Little Narragansett Bay covers both the Westerly Watch Hill area and Stonington, including Stonington Harbor. And we've done a lot of work in Little Narragansett Bay. An example of a bi-state partnership is that we brought the state of Connecticut, the city or the town of Stonington, and the village of Pawcatuck together with the Rhode Island state environmental agencies in the town of Westerly to deal with the stormwater pollution problem. And because the river, the Pawcatuck River, separates both states, it's the border. So both states have really come together in a really productive way to understand how they can work together to address this runoff pollution problem.
Yeah, I was wondering, if you have to be able to work together with other organizations, even organizations in other states, and it's good to know that, you know, you got some people and some those in Connecticut who understand the value, and it's theirs too, in a way too. You know, they enjoy it, and as much as anyone in Rhode Island would.
It's sort of a cliche, but you know, environmental, you know, fish and birds and animals don't know state boundaries. And the water doesn't know state boundaries. So, and one of the the other interesting things going on in Westerly is we recently received funding to add a new vessel to our education fleet. And we are looking forward to doing marine science educational programming in Stonington as well as Westerly.
Oh, very nice.
Which will be a great opportunity for school kids.
Do you get involved with Block Island at all? Is that part of your sphere of influence?
It is. We always look very carefully at where we can bring our own resources to benefit ecological and environmental issues. And Block Island is blessed with some very good advocacy and environmental organizations on the island.
They have like a whole section just for like a sanctuary, right?
They do. There's a great conservation ethic on the island. There's a great attention to water quality and restoration. So it's not been an area we've been particularly active, not because we don't care, but because we have partners on the island who are doing great work.
The irony of that is it's such a big tourist spot, yet they, on the same token, are able to have such environmentally conscious people there, right alongside of, you know, the massive amount of tourists in the summer.
That's right. That's right. It's been a real success story on Block Island.
Somebody wanted me, from my staff, wanted me to bring up the topic of wind turbines, because that's always a interesting topic where you come down on that, you know.
Yep. Well, you know, there's a proposal by a company called Deepwater Wind to build a 5-turbine wind farm off of the south coast of Rhode Island, of Block Island, in Rhode Island waters. Our perspective on wind turbines is that, first of all, there are many proposals that come forward for land-based wind turbines, and there have been a few that come across that have come forward on ocean-based turbines. We're very cognizant of our focus and mission around the bay and the ocean. And so we have looked very carefully at the science behind the resources offshore the coast of Block Island to understand how a wind farm might affect those resources. And they're everything from the bottom structures, the rocks, the eelgrass beds and so forth on the bottom where the wind farm might be proposed.
Things you don't even think about, because when you think of wind turbines, you think an alternative form of energy, which is a good thing for the environment.
Right.
But there are all those little things that you just mentioned, and probably many more that people don't think about, which could actually be adverse to proper environment, right?
Well, that's right, and there's no free lunch. There's no free lunch in life, and if you want energy and you want renewable energy, there are going to be some environmental impacts. In our view, the siting of a small 5-turbine wind farm off of Block Island has been well thought out, and it is the developer has chosen a site that minimizes the environmental impacts of the turbines themselves. We have not commented on the pricing arrangement. We generally are not particularly, let me put it this way, in terms of the aesthetics of wind farms and wind turbines, it's in my view, a very subjective assessment. People have different opinions about how they look, and
people don't want them near their property if they're opposed to it, because they think somehow it'll block their view, or it'll devalue
change the view, devalue their property,
right.
what have you. We've really concentrated on the marine effects. We generally don't comment on the aesthetics of projects like wind farms, because for every person you meet, and I've met a lot of them who voice their opinion about the wind farm, I'll hear as many people who like how they look as those who don't like how they look.
They're pretty. Look at them. You don't hear them. Yeah, blah blah blah. All this stuff. Yeah.
And we are an environmental organization.
Right.
We have to recognize that if we're going to reduce the effects of global warming or the causes of global warming, we have to be open to renewable energy resources that do not pollute, and this is a resource that doesn't.
Would you say it's a lot better than having an oil refinery in the bay?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like there's no comparison.
Right.
Again, it's not to say that we give anyone a blank check about where to put a wind farm or any other kind of energy infrastructure, but we have looked at the very specific case here. We feel pretty good about the location.
If somebody, like let's say a developer did have an idea for wind turbines, a wind farm, would it be in their best interest, or a good interest on their part, to seek you out and get your thoughts on it, considering what you do?
Well, it would be.
Not you personally, but the organization.
The organization. It would be a good idea. And I want to compliment Deepwater Wind, the developer in this case. They have worked very closely with the environmental community, ourselves and other organizations in Rhode Island, to learn from us about ways they can minimize the impacts of the construction of a site and the location of a site. And I think the company's done a very good job at really trying to understand what our concerns are, and has done a good job of addressing those.
Before we run out of time, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about, more specifically about the fundraising, and if you're looking for volunteers, and maybe what sort of skills they may need to be involved with Save the Bay. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, one of the things I would say is we from our very first day have always been a community organization, and we welcome the participation of people from all walks of life in helping and being involved in our mission. And some of those opportunities include volunteering. We do something like 55 beach cleanups every year, mostly in partnership with organizations like the YMCA or corporations, nonprofit organizations will coordinate beach cleanups with us. We do storm drain markings, which are kind of fun, and it publicizes the stormwater problem around the bay. We have other restoration opportunities. So I'd say if you are interested, our website has a lot of information on it that will steer you to internships, volunteer opportunities. And I would say we also worked very hard with small businesses to collaborate and coordinate on activities and events we do where there might be a shared interest in working together on public outreach and public education. A last thing I might mention is we have a very strong marine science education program targeting the public schools, and we really need help funding that. And this is where Lions clubs and Rotary clubs and local community organizations can help underwrite some of those programs.
Now, the website for people to go to and learn more?
Sure, it is www.savebay.org.
All right, go there, check it out, volunteer if you can, or just learn more about Save the Bay. Jonathan Stone, Executive Director, pleasure having you on the show once again.
Sean, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
All right, hope to have you back soon. You can watch this show and many others on our YouTube sites, and we thank you for joining us For another edition of For the Record, I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time. Take care.